Call this meeting to order. Can you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. We started doing good news in the school district a few months ago, and I do have a special good news to share. It says, from very grateful parents. On May 2nd, 2022, Mrs. Woodcup received a phone call from a very grateful parent whose child attends Jackson Primary. The child was missing and had left the home on his scooter. Although other vehicles were simply driving around this child, who was in the middle of Law Street, Mrs. Shea approached the child and got him out of the road. She called the police, who came and assisted. The child had told his grandma that he was going outside to play, but he decided to head to a friend's. He was on the wrong road and rather confused. It appears Mrs. Shea was in the right place at the right time. The parents are so glad that she took the time to help their child. The father was very relieved that nothing happened and their child is home safe, and the mother called Mrs. Shea as well to thank her. So thank you, Mrs. Shea, for taking care of that little one. The next item on the budget is the budget hearing. Oh, no, it says budget hearing, but before that, we have Board of Ed candidates to be heard.
I didn't know we were giving a speech.
Just a short speech. You can improv.
or make them go last and make them go first.
We're going to let Corinne go first.
Do I have to stand or can I sit?
You can, whatever you're comfortable doing.
Okay, I'll sit. I'm loud enough. My name is Corinne. I've been part of the district, I think, 20 plus years. Grew up not too far in Leroy. 3 kids we have. Zach is a sophomore at Niagara. Just picked him up today. Yay, my baby's coming home. Aiden is a junior and Ava is a freshman. I have the kids, we've literally hit all the schools, Robert Morris, JK, Jackson, high school, middle school, and volunteered in the parent groups for a while, youth football for a while, talking about youth baseball, and now I kind of feel like it's time to give back, to be on the board. I watched my father in Leroy for 20 plus years on the school board there. And he recently passed away in January, and it just felt right. I just felt the calling this year to do it. So that's about it. I graduated from Elmira. I stayed home for a while, have a degree in biology. Stayed home, actually was a teacher aide for a little bit when my daughter was at Jackson. Tutored at GCC for a little bit, and now I'm an online health coach.
Chez, you're up.
My name is Ches Roll. I grew up right here in Batavia. Graduated from Batavia High. Right after Batavia High, I joined the military. I spent 6 years in the military. It's one of the most things that I'm proud of, serving our country and coming back to Batavia and now serving the community on the Batavia board. I feel like I'm doing some great things. I have 3 kids. They range from kindergarten, first grade now, all the way through JK and now at the high school. Walking the same halls that I walk. I feel kind of old but proud, you know. But it's a new learning experience for me, and I love it since the first day that I joined. Thank you to both Johns. John Regal's not here, but John Marucci approaching me, saying come take the journey with us, and so thank you guys.
My turn now?
Yeah, now it's your turn.
My name's John Marucci. I've been on the board for 3 years now. It's been an enlightening experience because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But I wouldn't trade it for anything right now. I've thoroughly enjoyed 3 years I've been on, and I look forward to serving another 3 years or 2 years, however it comes out. We have a lot of unfinished work to do here, I think, and I plan on helping us get to where we need to be. And I have 2 older stepsons, Mike Need and Nick Need, that have graduated from BHS. My son Caden is graduating this year. I have a son Damien that's a freshman. I've been in Batavia for about 8 years, active with the Batavia Bulldogs. So just, it's a great experience, and I won't give it up for anything right now. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you were all so prepared. Presentation of the 2022-23 proposed budget and propositions. Mr. Jason Smith, Superintendent.
Thank you.
You guys are good. Put off the press.
So let me share this. Nick? Nick? Thank you. Okay. Good evening and welcome to our new board candidates as well. Wish them well in the election coming up, and want to thank Michelle Humes for her service as well before we get started. I have before you the 22-23 budget presentation. I want to recognize the work that Scott did on this prior to this point. Also thank Tricia and Molly for their support as well. I want to start with, this worked just a minute ago, you all saw it, I know you did. I'm going to try something else. There we go. I want to start with our mission and vision of the district, who we are, why we exist. You can see it right there. We want to work with our students to empower them to achieve their maximum potential. And it's important to recognize that as we go through the process of building a school budget, we keep these pieces in mind. So we're not pulling pieces out of thin air. As we go through and look at line items, expenditures, we want to make sure that what we do as a district and how we spend our funds are aligned to our mission and vision of our school district. So an analogy I'd like to talk about, remember this ride, the teeter-totter? I don't know if we have it anymore, if they're even allowed. But I always like to talk about the teeter-totter in terms of how we have a balanced budget. That's point one. And then point two, we want to make sure we have our school programs here and what our taxpayers and what our public can afford. In the ideal world, we want to have both of those balanced. If one is lopsided, there can be problems. So I think it's important to recognize that we have a balance there. One, in the revenues match the expenditures, and then two, we balance it with what our needs are versus what we think and recognize our public can afford and also support. So setting the stage, no pun intended, we have some musicians up there on the stage. Actually, pun intended, I'll say, there's a pun intended there. Some background there, the state aid has increased, especially with the federal stimulus funds. We oftentimes call those COVID funds. We're working to stabilize our staff. We're going to talk in a minute about the capital outlay project that's coming up in a later slide, looking at some masonry restoration around the high school. And of course, as you heard at our audit committee meeting, we're just like any organization, we're dealing with cost increases in health insurance and TRS, those pieces that are beyond our control to some degree. So on March 15th, we had a 2-hour workshop with this board, and we went through a laundry list of items on there. We looked at the expense side. We looked at equipment, contractual obligations, operations and maintenance, interscholastic athletics, on and on. Those are the pieces that go into the expenditure side. Revenues, money that we take in. That's been a monitoring process since about January. We have the state budget. Then we had the final budget. We saw an increase in there. We'll talk about that. We look at our reserves. Oftentimes I call reserves our savings accounts, right? Your own personal savings account and how we can manage those. The difference here sometimes is, or not sometimes, all the time, our reserves have specific purposes that as to what they can and can't be used for. We looked at our, we did a full enrollment study back in the late winter
And we're also looking at grant funding that Molly helps us oversee as well. So just some timelines. March 17th, we made our petitions available to the public. April 21st, the board last month adopted the budget that we have here before you that our voters will have to have a crack at in a couple weeks. And then April 27th, our candidates who we met tonight have filed for their election. Here's the profile of the district. We're not going to go through line by line. We'll make this available on the website. This is the most current profile. The biggest number, the largest number you can see are students, just over 2,000 students. We have seen some increase in enrollment at the grades pre-K and K, which is positive. So you can see there the rest of the information. Our daily attendance rate is in the low 90s, and the other data speaks for itself. Staffing, we want to make sure our staffing is aligned to our students. You've heard some conversation at the board level, how is our staffing compared to our students? We are engaging in a process right now. We've engaged in a study to make sure that we have the appropriate staff for the appropriate number of students. Obviously, staffing is our largest expense. It's an expense that we have to have. We want to make sure that our staffing is aligned to both our student population and program needs as well. So that's how, and that's being done as we speak. We should have a report from the board in late summer. Some more pieces to be proud about. Our graduation rates have been in the low to high 90s, or low to high 80s, low 90s. The opportunity we offer to our students, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics in every school. All the opportunities. I mentioned last week or last month with the board, my entry plan, one of the pieces I heard loud over and over again from our students especially is how many opportunities we have for them here in the school. Everything from fishing club to ski club and everything in between. So lots of opportunities for our students. We're looking at some new programs as well. My Brother's Keeper, that's going to be launched on Tuesday here as well to help our students of color. So there's our graduation rates. Some snapshots as to what we're doing on a daily basis. You can see we try to cover every subject area there, looking at science, STEM and STEAM. Reading, we are dealing still with a learning loss as a result of the pandemic, so we have extra efforts to ensure that our students are up to grade level with their literacy skills. Very proud, this is hot off the press. On Monday, we were named one of the best high schools. We received a silver medal from the U.S. News and World Report, so we're very excited about that. A press release is forthcoming, so we're pleased to have that. That will be announced formally in the media this week, but I wanted to just recognize that as well. So to show that our budget is aligned to student needs and what's important to us here at Batavia. So I mentioned also the pieces that we have. These are pieces that we don't have to have, that we recognize are important. Things like art. Things like school counselors. Just try to imagine a school without these pieces here in place. Laptops. There's no law saying we have to have laptops. But can't imagine this day and age students not having access to laptops. Musicals, athletics. Imagine a school with no athletics. So these are the things that are non-mandated that are built into our school budget for next year. More items there. College and Career Center at the high school, small class sizes, summer program, we're working on that as we speak. There's still concerns about school security. We have a nice group of aides here to help us out with that. Our school resource officer, very important to have here as well. Again, that's not mandated, but we use her on a daily basis. Community schools, you heard a presentation last month from Julia Rogers on the program at Robert Morris. So pieces that really make our school our own school. So the proposed budget for next year, I kind of joked with I had lunch with students weekly, and I always like to ask them, how much do you think it costs to run our school, right? Carol, I did that with you, right? And do you remember what your answer was? Was it even close to this number? No. They're usually off by about a lot of money, right? So $54 million, just over $54 million, increase of 5.19%. That's just slightly above average as to what our colleagues are in the Boston area. Tax levy, just under $20 million. $20 million. Am I saying that right? Yeah, I am. Go ahead and make sure. Just an increase of less than $200,000. Okay, so that is below the average in our BOCES. Case in point, the Consumer Price Index, how much things increase from year to year is up 4.7. So our tax levy is 1.42. We're just asking for an increase of $20 million from our taxpayers from last year. 1% of the current levy. Some background on the tax cap. This is commonly called the 2% tax cap. It's a misnomer. It's hardly ever 2%. Our tax cap, is it on there, was actually 1.62%. It's a third bullet. It was 1.62%. There's a calculation that we have to go through. When it was first proposed 10 years ago or so, it was called the 2% tax cap. It looked good and it sounded good, but the reality is it's 1.62% here. And again, the key point there is our levy that the board has adopted, it has proposed, is 1%. So we are below the tax cap. Key points here, over the last 11 years, since the tax cap has been around, our average allowable increase was just over 3%. Our average levy increase over the last 11 years was just under 1%. So we have been under year after year. And so the average savings, just about $29 million we saved in taxpayer savings by staying below the tax cap. We have a 20-year tax levy history. We're going to show a slide of that in just one second here. In 2012, 2013, we of course went through school consolidation. We had the neighborhood schools intact. Now we have schools based on grade level. Some of us have received checks in the mail over the past several years, commonly called rebate checks. Usually they come around election time. Not quite sure why that is. The fall election time, not board election time, fall election time. So the net, you can see the net impact savings there to our taxpayers, just about $3.5 million. Of course, we are not responsible for the assessments on homes. Within the last 3 years, there's been a tax levy decrease. The tax levy decrease in 3 of those years, and 5 of those years, there's been no levy decrease. So we've been trying to be conscientious of it. Again, going back to that teeter-totter effect, making sure we have strong programming, all those non-mandated pieces that we have versus what we think is affordable and reasonable. Again, more numbers to prove the point. What you want to see here, the numbers that are on my left are lower than the numbers on the right. Whether that's tax levy increase or CPI increase, the numbers are lower on the left, on my left, your left as well now, and then also on the right. So you can see there, whether it's a tax levy increase or the CPI, whether it's 15 years, 18 years, we've been below that as well, while still having a football team, while still having an orchestra, while still having concerts, while still having an SRO.
While still having best high school.
Best high school. Again, apologize, you can't quite see this. What I wanted to show you here, here's the hard data. Scott likes the hard data. The hard data that backs up the slide that I just showed. In the green font with the asterisk, there's been no change in the tax levy. See all those zeros, all right? And then in the white font or in the black font, there's been no change. Or there's been a decrease, rather. There's been a decrease in the levy. Again, that proves the slide I just had before. All the numbers speak for themselves, so we're proud of that, to be able to offer a reasonable education, a sound education at a reasonable cost to our community. All right, so the tax rate, as we speak, we're going through the reassessment process on many of our properties as well. Okay, so what we wanted you to see here, we're using the projected school tax impact using the April 14th, 2022 county assessment. You can see the key points there. The assessment figures are of course subject to change. An average house assessed at $100,000 will pay about $177 less with no change, with assuming no change in their assessment, which we have no control I have another slide that shows the relationship between tax rate, tax levy, and assessment. Again, the last bullet there, we are in compliance with the New York State tax cap. Simple way to understand this is assessments go up, the tax rate can go down. Simple reason for that, the denominator is larger. As you have a larger assessment base, there's more ways to share the tax rate. So as the assessment go up, our tax rate will go down. Again, we don't control the assessments, we don't control the tax rate, we control the tax levy. Here's an example, or not an example, here are the facts. Okay, in 2021, there's the total assessed value, $608 million. 21-22 is projected to go up. You can see the tax rate has gone down. So there's a decrease in the tax rate there of about 9.85%. Again, we don't control the assessments. Last slide on this, we want you to see here in the green, this is what the district has control over, the levy change, which you can see is 1%. The blue is the assessed value change that we just showed you on the previous slide. This one here in the beige is the tax rate change, which is a decrease. All right, so lots of numbers here. Just draw your attention to the bottom one here. This slide shows we have four taxing entities in our school district. We have, of course, the school, we have the city, we have the town, and we have the library, which I just voted on that budget this afternoon. So we have the four taxing entities. Obviously, the largest employer is us, right? But what we wanted you to see here from 2003 to now, our share has gone down by just under 7%. So it was at one point, it was 56%, and now we're down to 52% of the overall tax burden, if you will, to our property owners in the school district, in the city properties. And the numbers back it up, but the key point is that we're trying to be respectful of that as well, while again maintaining the excellent program that we strive to have. All right, now for the, just grab that. Here's the proposed budget. We have on the last year's 21-22, or the year that we are currently in, rather. The year that we are currently in, 21-22. Next year, 22-23. There's the dollar change, just over $2 million, just under $3 million. Percent change, 5.19%. That's our increase in our expenditures. I'll show you the revenue slide in a second. There's a tax levy, 1% change from 21-22 to 22-23, and then the revenue there as well. We have a separate slide on revenue we'll show in a second. 7% increase in revenue. Some of that is due to increase in state aid funding and also outside grants. We'll talk about later. All right, so fund balance. What we want you to see here, okay? Fund balance, the way I like to explain fund balance, and Scott, this may not be a perfect explanation, but this is how I'd like to explain fund balance. We have, most of us get paid every 2 weeks, right? Or maybe we get paid every week. You pay your bills out of the check, or you pay your bills out of there, right? You pay your heating bill, you pay your electric bill, you pay your credit card bill. The money that's left over, that's kind of like your fund balance. Same thing with the school budget. Okay, the fund balance is what the excess funds that we have available to apply towards next year's budget, which keeps the spending reasonable. What you can see here is there's an increase in our fund balance due in large part to the COVID funds we have received. So we have more revenue coming into the school district that eases, if you will, the general fund burden. The more money we have coming in funds from the federal government due to COVID, that eases the burden on the general fund, which we use to pay our general expenses. So there's an increase there again, which is good because we have not excess funds, we have grant funds that we can use to ease the general fund. All right, so also built in this budget is a $100,000 capital outlay project. basically what we can call home maintenance. Okay, we have to have home maintenance. And the key here is we're allowed to do a capital project up to $100,000 with voter approval as part of the school budget. Our architects have identified the need to look at some masonry restoration at the high school. For every dollar we spend on that, we get 91 cents back. So it's a wise use of funds, and that's built into the budget as well. We've been doing that for the past several years. There is some proposal to maybe increase that amount, Scott, isn't there, to have the amount higher?
What was that?
Isn't there a proposal to make the $100,000 higher
There
down
was,
the road?
but it didn't pass.
So that has been talked about to make it even higher, but right now we're capped at $100,000. So that if and when the budget is approved, that will be taking place sometime next year. All right, revenues. This is money that is coming into the district. Just over half of our funds come from state aid and federal aid. The rest come from the tax levy, other local revenue, fund balance. We just explained fund balance and other items. So that's how we pay the bills, right, Pam? That's how we pay the bills. So the revenue that we have coming in. All right, so appropriations is a big fancy word for where we spend the money. Where's the money going to be spent? What I want you to see here is it's spent almost, for every dollar we spend, about 60 cents is spent on instruction, which includes not just math, but it includes all of our athletics, it includes our musicals, band, it includes everything that touches students. So for every dollar we spend, about 60 cents is spent on instruction. The rest you can see is involved with employee benefits, health insurance, retirement payments, those types of things. Debt service. If you have a mortgage payment, that's essentially what debt service is how we, it's essentially the school's mortgage payment. The last line, interfund transfers, part of this is that $100,000 project that we just talked about. The rest is for summer school. It's a interfund transfer. The bulk of that is made up of capital outlay, the masonry work at the high school. So on the third Tuesday in May, this is the budget proposal. We have 3 board seats available. We have 2 appointed positions currently filled by Mrs. Humes and Mr. Roll. Those end on May 17th. The candidate with the highest vote will have the term of May 18th, 2022 to June 30th, 2025, and the rest fall in that order, with the lowest vote getter getting the 2-year term, or the just over 2-year term. And we just talked about that. That's a drawing order that we did it in random. Okay, Corinne Anderson, John Marucci, and Ches Roll. Those are the 3 vacant seats that we have. There's a voting information, May 17th from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. at Robert Morris if you live north of Route 5, at the high school if you live south of Route 5. And I'll end with how I started with the teeter-totter. Wanted to show you the program that we have here for our students, and then balancing it out with support from our community. And there's my contact information. Are there any questions? Kylie, how did I do? I did great. Okay, good.
I understood.
You understood everything? I'm gonna give you a test later on.
Oh, great.
Any questions from the board? Or from the public who's here? This is the budget hearing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now close the budget hearing. Next item in our regular meeting is public to be heard. And we have 3 people interested in speaking to the board, and I will just quickly go through the guidelines. You'll have 3 minutes, which will be limited to stated topics. You're being called up as first come, first serve. So if you're conscientious like Mrs. Pacino, she was here really early. We will may only listen to appropriate topics as determined by me. And there won't be any response given, so it's really, you're just giving us your opinions. So you're up, Mrs.
I'm up. I'm used to
Pacino.
that from city council, so
Okay.
I don't expect you to argue with me.
Okay.
I made this short. That's how short I made it. Okay. In spring of 1927, BHS had a very unique assembly program. A young man strode to the top of the stage and said to everyone, "Sing with me." And they did. And the Pick, which was the newspaper title then, said, "And we sang as we had never sung before." Frank Owen had come to the high school. Over the next 37 years, Mr. Owen created the base of an ever-growing music program that involves a major portion of the students from kindergarten to graduation and years afterwards. Starting with a girls' glee club and a boys' glee club, Mr. Owen went on to form an orchestra, a band, instrument lessons, and 100 voice choristers so strong they were selected to perform a holiday concert each year on the radio for our servicemen overseas. Indeed, the foundation that Owen created was so strong that 95 years later, the Batavia School's music program is recognized not only for its strength and excellence, but for the support of the community and the many alumni it has inspired. A score of music groups have grown here, from jazz band to drum lines, from barbershop quartets to musical theater shows. BHS has literally sent hundreds of music teachers and performers who teach in schools, perform in community bands and symphony orchestras, church and community choirs, and on stage and productions and on Broadway. I'm here to represent hundreds of other alumni, asking you to allow us to honor the man who started it here at BHS by naming the high school auditorium as a show of respect and thanks to Frank E. Owen, former educator and longtime promoter of all things musical in our school district. Because he worked with high school students, we agree that the current high school would be our choice for this honor, the auditorium in which the high school students still perform with joy and excellence. I'm thanking you for your attention and hoping you understand how very important it is to the BHS alumni who have benefited and continue to enjoy the music we're given at Batavia High School. And next week we will be putting people into a new thing, which is our musicians of note. We actually have an honor society, or a roll of honor for musicians, which is one of the few schools that have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't want to say anything more, you have a minute.
I talk so fast. I could go on for 3 or 4 hours.
Oh, I'm sure you could. Next person is Melanie Case.
Good evening. My name is Melzy Case. I am a BMS music teacher, 2012 BHS graduate, and member of the community for 28 years, aka my whole life. I support the naming of the current Batavia High School auditorium at 260 State Street after Frank E. Owen. As a longtime director of music ensembles and of the music department here at BCSD, I truly believe our music programs are what they are today thanks to Mr. Owen's passion and contributions. One of the mottos in the induction speech for the Tri-M Music Honor Society here at BHS is that we should study the past to effectively prepare for our future. I am always astounded when I see photographs of Maestro Owen's large ensembles and hear recordings of his choristers. Mr. Owen's work and legacy live on each day, from the scholarship in his name, of which I was a grateful recipient, to the BHS auditorium, which he helped design, that is used by all music ensembles, production and drama clubs, and other school groups each and every day. Even though I never had the honor to meet him, I can feel Frank E. Owen's work and spirit in our music department today. Naming our auditorium after such a legend will, in turn, help us to honor all past, present, and future music students and teachers here at BCSD. The BCS District Policy Manual states that the Board of Education may recognize individuals by means of an award. Such awards may include a dedication of a room or building. We have Vandetta Stadium, Woodward Field, and Anderson Field, among others, and I hope the entire board will consider naming the BHS Auditorium after Frankie Owen and adding his name to that prestigious list. Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, Shawn Williams, please.
I'm Shawn Williams. I think many of you know me. I'm the band director over at the middle school. I do live in the district, and I'm here on behalf of Frankie Owen to have the auditorium named there. As Ms. Case pointed out, that there is precedent. This is not an unusual nor inappropriate request, and thusly I would like to give you a slight history lesson. Now, I did prepare a slideshow, but I guess it's not going to be used, but you can see it at a later time. I'd like to start with the Coach Vendetta's stadium. Daniel Vendetta coached his last season in 1968. In 1973, the new stadium that was built there, or the refurbished part of the stadium, was was dedicated in his honor. Unfortunately, he had died earlier that year. As you see the new stadium that's out there, there's a fantastic plaque. And there's a quote on there from an unknown poet. I tried to find it, but it's beautiful how it mentions the football atmosphere, the autumn atmosphere, and the marching bands and everything there. And it's a fantastic testament to what Coach Vendetta did for this district for, I guess, 27 years that he was there. And he retired in 1968. Mr. Anderson's field, Ed Anderson, that field right over there, was a coach, and it was dedicated, the field was dedicated in his honor in 2015. He was a coach for 6th grade from 1965 until his retirement in 1998. He coached varsity girls softball. He also coached junior high bowling. Fantastic guy. I've talked to many people who knew him. Mr. Mike Bromley, our athletic director, commented that he left his mark on generations of Batavia Middle High School students while serving on the Batavia City School System for more than 30 years. They dedicated a field for him, and it absolutely is justified because he was a great man. Now I come to Frank Owen. Now Frank Owen retired after 37 years of service here in Batavia from 1927 to 1964. He was the music instructor there, as you heard from his case, that he started programs here that still live to this day. They're strong. They're all because of his dedication and his work there. And he retired 58 years ago. Now, in that time from when he retired, a stadium has been named in honor of a fantastic coach and the legacy that he leaves, and another coach there and the legacy that he leaves, and they're fantastic coaches. But I would like to reiterate, too, that this, I guess you could call him a coach, this man graced our auditorium here for 27 years, and I believe it is way past due to recognize this first director of music education who built the program that we base our current music programs on. And I also think that it is only fitting that just after 3 years of our musicians of note, that's our Music Hall of Fame that we've instituted there. Now, if you go by the Athletic Hall of Fame, you can see all the people that Coach Vendetta worked with, all these fantastic players and teams that are honored there, and we have started in the tradition of the athletics. I think it's only fitting that we honor our very first coach, if you want to call him, our first music educator, Frankie Owen, and name the auditorium after him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now go on to presentation. Batavia Counseling Plan, Sherry Cremedy, counselor.
Sherry, you want me to walk out and walk back in so you can...
Yes, I want to make sure that you have to.
If you don't have it, I can pull it up for you.
I can just...
You want to log
Yeah, I
in?
can
I'll
just
log
log
in.
out. Oh, no, let's do it. Let's do it. No, just go ahead and...
This was not planned.
Right, yeah, we're like,
You guys were texting each other before you came.
right, we're
Black and
like.
white. We wanted to be cool.
were joking before we came up about the clicker. Like, we were all saying, who's gonna handle the clicker? Because we were teasing, like, we all got this I Love Lucy thing when it comes to, you know, things, and we're like, we'll figure it out. If worst comes to worst, we'll hit the space bar and we'll just keep moving through it.
It obviously took a higher skill set.
Thank you. My name is Sherry Crumby. I am department chair, but also school counselor at the middle school, formerly also at the high school. This is Deb Ryder. She's on the advisory team for our counseling plan and a former principal with the city school district. And this is Karina Bayman. She's a school counselor at Jackson. Today we're going to kind of talk to you a little bit about our school counseling plan, which has kind of been in existence for the last 4 years. It's a quite extensive document, and I've been fortunate to be a part of it with Barb Roba and Bernadette Crumpkett when this first started. It's quite an extensive document through ASCA, which is a national model. It has 4 parts to it. Thank you. Which are the foundation, which we start out developing like missions and vision. As we're kind of going through this today, all of these pieces connect, and we'll kind of show you how they connect with the counseling plan and how they get implemented into the school. So we started out kind of like with our national ASCA standards, which we have to go by when we sort of create things. And then we have the mission and vision of the counseling plan, which aligns with the district goals. Then there's the delivery system, which means how all 12 counselors implement the counseling plans into the school. And then there's the management system, whereas our advisory council comes into play, where we meet twice a year and kind of talk about how the implementation of the counseling plan is going. The use of data, whether it's attendance data, behavior data, academic data, that's also a part of our counseling plan. The use of time, counselors complete that once a year right now, and whereas we just want to make sure, despite the changing needs of students, we're creating a balance of at least 80% direct service and possibly 20% indirect to make sure we're meeting the needs. The accountability, we do reporting, we monitor our school calendar to make sure that we're checking off things we're supposed to be doing between September and June, and we do a program assessment at the end of each year where counselors give their feedback of how the counseling plan is going. All right, so the next few slides Mrs. Ryder is going to talk about, because it kind of pertains to the advisory team and their input. Okay?
Hi. As Sherry said, I'm the community member of the team at this moment in time, and since everybody was talking about their history at Batavia High, class of 70 alum. And I was the editor of the PIC, so there you go. It was still there when I was here, so there you go. I'm sure this is not really new news to you, but the COVID challenges have brought so much of this to light, negatively affecting academic growth and widening the disparities between the current populations. English learners struggle to learn grade level content remotely while still mastering the language. Students with disabilities, the disruption of their aids and their services really push so many issues for them. Marginalized students face particularly heightened risk for mental health issues, increase in mental health issues among students, and seniors struggling with the disappointment of prom, graduation, and or post-secondary plans. And not only are these issues for our school, but also for our community. And we see that as well. The purpose of the advisory committee is to provide feedback on the program goals, review the results, make recommendations, and advocate for the program. Total number of members is currently 23. We have parents, students if appropriate, at this time there isn't any, community stakeholders, school counselors, school administrators, and teachers. Now, goal 1 is to improve the chronic absentee rates. And there's a variety of things that they'll be using: closing of the gap action plan, the attendance innovation plan, data meetings, community agencies, school correctiveness initiatives, school parent communication extended day, and the district social worker. Also, fostering a common understanding of the multi-tier systems of support, how it supports students, and what each staff member's role will be within those tiers. Work in collaboration with parents, administration, teachers, support staff to implement the tier-based interventions, participate in the MTSS professional development training. Goal 3 is to continue to improve the reciprocal relationships with families and the communities, creating conditions that empower students as they successfully transition through and beyond the schools. Community school initiatives, strategic planning process, college and workforce connections. Goal 4 is the school SEL team will continue to establish school-wide practices with the long-term goal that students and staff understand, apply and utilize social emotional development skills and techniques to achieve their maximum potential. Working with the SEL, the PBIS teams, promote building social emotional activities, delivering classroom lessons, small and group lessons. The last is Batavia City School District will utilize the culturally responsive sustaining education framework to implement the key units of this instruction developed during the summer of 2021. Promoting advocacy, equity, conduct classroom lessons with diversity and teaching tolerance.
All right, so this pretty much breaks down our counseling plan and the components that work within it. So the first bullet says closing of the gap attendance action plan. So basically at every building, each building has their own action plan to target students with chronic attendance issues. And the interventions that we do to help with that attendance gap. And then we also have a curriculum action plan. So each grade level gets a minimum of 4 classroom lessons for grades K through 12. And we keep track on that data, how many students attend those lessons, and how we can improve on that. We also have small group action plan for individual and group lessons as well, K through 7. As Sherry talked about before, the use of time assessment. So all the counselors meet with their principal at the beginning of the year to go over how we use our time. The principal signs off on it. We have goals that we work toward every year as well. The program assessment that Sherry spoke about, our school counselor competency assessment that we do every year to see how we think we're doing. Our SEL and PBIS activities that we keep track of at each building. We also have advisory team involvement and our school counselor yearly calendar as well. So these show you some of the social emotional learning activities that are going on across the district. So our counselors have done a nice job of keeping that data and showing what we've been working on in each building and really trying to prioritize SEL, especially post-pandemic. So these are some of the examples that we've been doing. So student and staff spotlights, student and staff wellness activities, holiday theme weeks, kindness months, students check-ins, field days, SEL daily lessons and affirmations. We do student and parent newsletters as well as staff newsletters. All of the buildings are doing peace circles, Red Ribbon Week, Spirit Week, Mix It Up days. At the middle school and high school, they're doing teaching tolerance initiatives as well. There's bulletin boards that highlight SEL, sources of strength at the high school, student wellness formal and informal surveys, and student incentive programs. Lots going on. And then looking at our assessment results for the program assessment for this year, it showed that all the school counselors in the district completed the program assessment data. We need to make sure that that data, including attendance, academics, behavioral, career, is available and streamlined to support the counseling plan and aligns with district goals. Examine district policies and practices on chronic attendance to see how we can continue to improve that gap. Continue to review our action plans so that they are based on the student needs that are ever changing, and review the role of our advisory team to include more advocacy and engagement, perhaps get more stakeholders in the community to join the team. BCSD school counseling plan is in progress in the areas that Sherry talked about at the beginning: foundation, program management, delivery, and accountability. It showed that all the school counselors are providing individual and group counseling to students that have identified concerns or needs. And school counselors' direct and indirect services use of time is being used according to ASCA guidelines. And we do provide advocacy for every student. So the summary of our closing of the gap action plan for last year showed that specifically in the middle and high school, we found that students that had chronic attendance and failure issues chose to do remote learning last year instead of coming back into the building, which kind of further got them behind academically. And then certain subgroups and certain subgroups are still needing additional interventions in order to close that academic and attendance gap as well. So we're trying to work on coming up with more interventions to help close that gap. We also found it was important for counselors to identify those high-risk students that have been consistently absent for more than 20 or more days and creating attendance intervention plans. And in New York, the state education department defines chronic absenteeism as missing 10% of school days, which is 18 days or more per year if there are 180 days per school year. So some of the interventions that we do for those students with chronic attendance issues are check-ins with the student. We go to the homes, we bring in the parents for conferences, we send letters home, and we also do incentive programs.
Okay, these slides here were provided to the leadership team by Molly Corey, and I appreciate it because it helps us at the counseling team when we do our district-wide meetings to kind of discuss what's going on. Like I said, we've been kind of going with our school counseling plan for a few years, so we've been kind of tracking attendance pre-COVID and now definitely to be post-COVID to kind of see how attendance been impacting our students. So this is J.K. Jackson Middle School and High School over the years. As we can see, no surprise, COVID, created a big jump in attendance issues, and this is the 10% of the New York State data here. The next slide is a little bit more interesting. This is what we're kind of talking about, the subgroups of students who the gap is a little bit wider. Of course, if we look, it's still kind of high with some of our subgroups of students, and that would range with minority students, students of color, students with disabilities, and students who may be economically disadvantaged. It was still a little high, 17, 18, a little bit pre-COVID, but definitely no surprise during COVID that absenteeism rose significantly. So when we talk about the closing of the gap right now, we definitely are aligned with district goals, but what we want to do is, as counselors, look at these numbers here and maybe target our closing of the gap to those subgroups and create more individualized attendance action plans, focusing so these numbers start to come down. Okay? And of course, some interrelated causes of chronic attendance, which again is no surprise to a lot of us. Mental health, health problems with students, homelessness. Some kids have a lack of safety, perceived lack of safety at school, inconsistent parenting, poverty, some unreliable transportation, some messaging around attendance. Teachers have noted some social promotion sometimes for students can be a barrier where they don't feel like attendance is important. Language barrier with our E&L students. Some students not understanding the coursework, so they just figured not to be there. Then that kind of solves the issue of them not knowing the work. And then some kids are caring for family members. So some of these could all be one, two, or a multitude of a lot of them. As we mentioned before, we do the curriculum action plan, which we go into, all the counselors go into lessons 4 times a year. And the lessons could range anything from bullying to character development. They range based on the schools. The counselors get to pick which lessons they want to do. In 2019-2020, just before COVID, counselors were able to push into the lessons and deliver at least 301 lessons. You have to remember, even though I say 4 lessons, there's literally 8 classrooms, am I saying that, per counselor.
Right.
So that means if you look at all of 12 counselors across the district, that's the lessons we've implemented. With COVID, we had to sort of switch to in-person and remote, so our numbers definitely did drop because we were more focused on the mental health, social, emotional, so we didn't get to push in as many as we would like to. Small groups that were delivered right now are K through 7, 8 through 12 are pending. We're looking on devising some small groups that focus on trauma-sensitive groups, mental health, bullying for 8 through 12, but we are working on those. So with small groups, despite COVID, we were able to deliver service to 100 students in small group instruction. We're working with our perception data and assessments as far as assessing how things are going with students. counselors give students what we call exit surveys, and our exit surveys have been positive where students are enjoying these push-in lessons. And I think the consistency of them even after COVID is helping reduce some of the social emotional issues of some students. All right, so the next step for our comprehensive plan, this would be year 5. And of course, right when we got the hang of how to do a lot of this, New York State throws us a ball curve and they printed a 4th edition. So what we're doing is we're kind of going through some professional development of looking at what New York State wants us to do. The 4th edition to me is less kind of than the other edition. So I kind of think the counselors will want to stick to what they've been doing. They're kind of asking us to do less, which is okay, but I kind of like to set the bar a little higher, so consistently we just kind of keep doing what we're doing, but we will be implementing some new forms. But overall, our next steps is just to improve communication and linkages with school staff and stakeholders of how our counseling plan works. We didn't get a chance to present to the board last pre-COVID, but the year before that we did. Use our data meetings in schools to create creative attendance initiative for our kids and families to sort of remove some of these barriers. Continue with our professional development around mental health, suicide training, how to implement more effective classroom lessons. Data's a big one. I think that would be for any counselor in districts. We don't have a specialized data department for counselors, so we all do data on top of everything, all the classroom lessons. And I can honestly say our counselors do an awesome job with data collection. We talk about what could be improved. Increasing mental health support for school counselors. Definitely working more with community-based agencies to get more mental health support in schools. Counselors are doing an awesome job tackling the upcoming mental health concerns of students, but the trauma is definitely a lot more complex with our kids now. They had trauma before, a lot of our students, but now with COVID, it's complex trauma with them. So counselors are doing an awesome job, definitely facilitating and just de-escalating a lot of concerns that are coming into the school. And just continue trainings around policy updates, around our suicide lethality, looking to create a committee that kind of looks at all of our assessments, and just overall student and staff wellness initiatives. This is a lot, so we want to make sure that we're checking in with all of our counselors to make sure that they feel connected and not burnt out in order to give the best that they can to our students in our schools. Thank you very much. Our last slide is just questions. I know it was a lot, and I want to thank Mrs. Ryder and Karina for coming today to assist me with this. And I can always be reached, any of us can be reached if you have any further questions. The district counseling plan is on our website. It's about an 82-page document if you just want to read something. But there's a master binder that will be located with our Director of Special Education, which has everything listed in it from our lesson plans to our data, which is a 5-inch binder. Again, if you just want to read something, that's where that will be. And New York State, they're busy with other things right now, but eventually they go around to the schools and sort of check in to see how counselors are performing with the ASCA model.
I don't have a question, but I do want to comment that I'm very impressed and heartened by the Dignity Matters Task Force that Batavia Middle School has started and is slowly getting parents engaged in, and the counselors that attend are awesome. I just want to go from that way.
Thank you.
I have a question. It seems that not only with all the mental health issues that our students have experienced with COVID, the attendance part of this is huge. Do you need more people?
Well, I do think when we met, and thank you again for coming to the advisory team meeting, so this is a little redundant for you, but I appreciate your feedback. The two things we want to move forward to with next steps is to look at maybe an attendance committee as well with our advisory team and counselors, because it's a big piece. And I think what Kelly Marciano was saying is maybe to look at our attendance as far as tier-based, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and our schools with the closing of the gap, like Karina School is 20 or more days, middle school is 20 more days, we target the subgroups. But I do think that those kiddos are considered tier 3, which wraparound services would be needed. It's a high level of intervention, but I do think an attendance committee to focus on tier 1 and tier 2, which Jackson and I believe the high school, JK and the high school still do 10% or higher, and their numbers are pretty up there. So we're going to be talking about it at our next counseling meeting to talk about how maybe next steps would be to develop that attendance committee. And we also spoke with Julia Rogers about that as well.
Well, I'm just not one normally to add to the budget. Can any COVID monies be
Social workers
sent this way?
We added 2 social workers.
Okay.
And we're looking at a grant for another, so we have,
Okay,
yes, yes.
You're talking about attendance workers to go out in the field, correct?
Oh, yes, more staff, all
Yeah,
this.
yeah, anything that can help us
Yeah.
get our kids back in school.
Somebody that's not so much as a truant person, but somebody who can help provide services or information to families and to kind of evaluate what they need in that particular household and then communicate back with the schools and the counselors. And I think that for subgroups, that's the only way you're gonna reach them.
I was gonna say,
You just have to go to the house
Yeah.
and you have to have a conversation
Yeah,
and you have to do some evaluation.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's still-
Like I said,
Such a- I want to head to the budget.
Yeah.
Yes. So definitely we're going to be having those talks. And like I said, any further questions, you can feel free to email me or any of us. And we're happy to share with you anything about the counseling plan. All right. Thank you.
We have next reports, student ex officio report, Miss Kylie Tatarka.
Right.
This is your exam. Okay, explain the budget, Kylie.
Look, I just got my APs done, guys. Sorry, I don't know if I can handle this. Alright, so first, there's no new information on the senior trip, prom, or graduation, but I just wanted to take the time to just share how excited the seniors are for only having about a month left in school. I don't think there's a day that I go to school and someone's not talking about their prom dress or their plans for prom. So I just want to talk about how excited and how good we feel right now. And I think that's just something positive to just start out with. And so next is our end of year Spring Fest. It's still in its planning stages. We want to have clubs to participate in Spring Fest by creating booths to create fun activities that will introduce that club to younger students. I'm the president of our Triumph Club, and we're thinking of having like 2 xylophones where if I would play a melody, someone would copy it and we'd give them a little prize for copying that perfectly. The next is the Batavia High Jazz Cabaret concert was on April 28th, where our musical ensembles, including the Musical Demons Select Group, Jazz Band, Saxophone Ensemble, and more, performed to raise money for the music department. And finally, the 3rd annual Musicians of Note induction ceremony will be held in the high school auditorium on May 13th at 7 p.m. They are inducting a handful of Batavia alumni and 1 faculty member, all of which have influenced the Batavia community through music. The high school will be providing ensembles to perform for the inductees to celebrate their musical influence. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for including the good news about the seniors being so happy these days. That's good to hear. Next, we have the superintendent's report, please.
I just want to begin by self-correcting one comment I made on the budget. I just realized as I sat down. On the slide where I show the city properties, library library, percentage, I said the town, I should have said the county. So the example I had there was the city properties. Obviously, the town is not taxing the city. So we have the school, we have the library, we have the city itself, and then the county. So the example that I gave, when I should have said county, I said town. So I wanted to make sure I get that in the record
The slide is accurate, however, my words did not match what was on the slide, so I wanted to get that fixed. We recognize this week Teacher Appreciation Week. We have had and are having several celebrations to recognize our talented teachers here. We also recognize Principals Day. That actually was on Sunday, May 1st, and we had recognized the principals as well. I want to again thank Michelle Humes for her year of service here with us. As Kylie said, we had the Musicians of Note coming up next Friday, which I'm looking forward to, and playing in as well. I know one of the honorees rather well. We have the 8th grade dance tomorrow night, and Mr. Batavia is on May 20th. And I just want to update the board with the entry plan presentation that I gave last month. I'm in the process of now sharing that with each school. I was at John Kennedy yesterday, and have 3 more meetings planned with each school to update them on the entry plan. The plan is on the website, or the results are on the website, and I shared it last week with our families in my bi-weekly update. So just want to recognize that, and looking forward to the upcoming spring event as Kylie had talked about. So thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is alterations. We don't have any, so we will move on to consent items. I need a motion for consent.
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Lenve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Humes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote.
Mrs. Lenve.
Yes.
Mrs. Humes.
Yes.
Mr. Rowe.
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Marucci.
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict.
Yes. We'll now move on to old business. Our first old business is the board vote on dedicating and naming the VHS auditorium for Mr. Frankie Owen per policy 3130, recognition of community achievement. I need a motion.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Bowman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Roll. Is there any discussion? Seeing none?
Mrs. Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Rowe.
Yes.
Mr. Marucci.
Yes.
Mrs. Lenve.
Yes.
Mrs. Humes.
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict.
No. Thank you. We will be dedicating the VHS auditorium to Mr. Frank Owen. Next is revised 2022-23 Board of Ed meeting schedule. I need a motion.
I did revise that just so everyone knows to Mondays, with the exception of the reorg meeting, but I did move that. It's still gonna be Thursday, but it'll be at 6:15, so that Mr. Regal will have an easier time. Because I know Thursday's an off night for him
So it'll be at 6:15?
on Thursday. Just because I know Thursday.
And that's the only Thursday meeting we have.
That's the
for
only
year.
one.
And I'll be able to zoom in?
Yes.
Yep, I'll just need some info, but we can do that later. Yep.
I need a motion.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Humes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Marucci. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote.
Mrs. Humes.
Yes.
Mr. Marucci.
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Rowe.
Yes.
Mrs. Lenve.
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict.
Yes. Revised 2021-22 Batavia City School District school calendar. I need a motion.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Marucci. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bowman. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote, please.
Mr. Marucci.
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Rowe.
Yes.
Mrs. Humes.
Yes.
Mrs. Lenve.
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict.
Yes. Next, we're going on to new business. Declare SECRA Type 2 action for 2022-23 capital outlay project for repair of masonry at the Batavia High School. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Humes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Marucci. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you can call the vote.
Mrs. Humes.
Yes.
Mr. Marucci.
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Rowe.
Yes.
Mrs. Lenve.
Yes.
Mrs. Benedict.
Yes. Do you want anyone on the board to answer? Or are you thinking the board president, not specifically me, but a board president or the superintendent? What are
So
you
I think I
thinking?
can offer a couple of thoughts on that.
Okay.
The first thing I want us to understand that this is not a public meeting. It's a meeting held in public. So
Yeah.
so there's a difference there. budget hearing that we just had, that was a public meeting, so people should have the right, do have the right to ask any questions, whether you're on the board or not. That's what a public meeting is, right? So when Scott had his public hearing on the reserve fund last month, or the reserve, not reserve, repair reserve fund, that's a public hearing where the public should ask questions, and they can, and we are then obligated to answer. So if I got a question, if Corinne asked me, how can you spend an X amount of dollars on this, I have to answer it or get an answer for her. The difference between the meeting that we're in now, this is a meeting in public. There is no obligation for the board to answer. The risk you would have, as the example Ann gave is a very good one, we want to be careful to not get into a argument. And then the second point is you would also want to find out if the board can answer it, then you would want to direct the superintendent or his staff to come back with an answer. I think you want to be really careful about answering something in public that you may not be 100% sure what the answer is. Certainly you can say thank you. I'm not going to say you can't respond. I would caution the difference between a public hearing or a meeting, a public meeting versus a meeting in public. Obviously, we can't meet behind closed doors unless we're an executive session, but this is a public meeting. This is not a public meeting. The budget hearing we had is a public meeting. So that's what the difference is. Those are just facts. So
I know one of the things whenever we decided to want to move it back a couple days was Mr. Burke brought this up. He says, somebody comes here and asks a question, we'd love to give them an answer. But a lot of times we don't have the opportunity to get the answer for them the way we should. Most of the time we're getting a question, okay, now we have to get you an answer. Now you want to change it to Friday to have them talk. Again, are you really, we know what they want to ask, but we've got to have enough time to make sure we have the proper and appropriate answer for them. Not just somebody comes up and they ask us a question, we might not have the right answer right off the bat.
And if we're even able to give the answer in public too. There's that side of it too. So
I think for me, the biggest piece is to acknowledge. We haven't always in the past, I believe, hopefully we did today, but acknowledging that this person took the time and came and spoke, that they had an interest, that they had, to help us as a board, to express their opinions. At the very least, I think that we should consistently acknowledge them, acknowledge each individual that speaks.
I do know that this question has come up, and I have talked to our attorney about this at the beginning of the school year about answering questions and whatever, and I know he would advise exactly what Jason has said, that this is a meeting, this isn't a public meeting, it's a meeting held in public, and there is a difference, and I do know that the attorney would advise us not to change our policy on this.
and there's nothing wrong with what Barb is saying about like acknowledging the person or directing me or whoever's here to have an answer if we're able to answer it in public, and then also too you would want to make sure that the person coming to speak with us has at least talked with me first. I've had several conversations with parents already where they wanted to come to the board, and we were able to get the problem solved at the ground level where it should be solved. And if I wasn't able to solve it, then obviously they have the right to come forward, which they do at any point. But good practice is to have it solved, bottom up, so to speak.
I guess my question is then, so if Patty P shows up and she has questions, does somebody answer her, or do they just go unanswered?
I think it depends on what the question is. So if give me an example.
Off the top of my head, I can't think. But if someone comes in and has something that they would like us to answer, and we're not going to answer. Is someone here? Someone here going to answer them, whether it's via email or a phone call?
Yes.
Or
yes.
at some point, because I don't think we hear that though. Like you don't always hear that as a board member. It's like, okay, so and so came in and asked things, and I don't know if you've answered them.
If we're able to give the answer, if I'm able to give the answer, and if I know the answer, I will. If not, I think my track record is pretty solid as far as getting back to people. So that will not be an issue.
Perfect.
I can honestly say, before everything went to hell in a handbasket with COVID, coming to meetings, there were a few times that people came in, had questions, and Pat Direct had told them, we will have an answer for you. And we looked at superintendent, whoever was here, and they made sure they got the answer to them. So I can honestly say that will happen.
That is true.
Chaz?
Even Chris Daly.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I just wanted to put it out there. I know
Yeah, it
other
does
people-
seem funny, doesn't it,
Yeah.
that they speak to us and we don't,
Yeah, it is.
Can you
Yeah.
tell them, I'm sorry, can I speak? Their protocol. Can you tell them, like, we can't say anything if you
well, it's in our,
Is it in there?
yeah, it's in
That-
this.
Okay,
Mhm.
because I did think it was weird, but you explaining it, I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Sometimes it also may help, you know, in the board that I worked for prior to me coming here, the board president would indicate just what's written down there. So that might be a way to Corinne's point, to at least recognize that.
Yes,
You at least put it out there, so.
yeah.
And I would like to think that if it became argumentative, I know I would back down. I would say thank you and defer to you. I mean, I really think the acknowledgement is the most important piece, but I think probably the majority of the questions asked could be answered without having a big brouhaha. But you always run that risk.
Yes, you do.
You know, just one brouhaha is all you need. So, but I would like to think that for the most part we are, responsible. And I really believe the community members would rise to that standard as well. They're taking the time, they're taking their energy, they're taking their commitment to come and talk to us. I don't think that they're going to go off the rails. And of course, for every time, there's always an exception to everything, but that's just my thought.
Okay.
I will say this, I mean, in our office, I will say Jason and I field a lot of calls, and we get back to every single person. Whether it's email, a phone call, or we give it to somebody that is, maybe it's a school principal. I can honestly say I don't think anybody gets ignored.
Okay. Anything else? I need a motion to adjourn, please. Someone, Mrs. Humes. Second? Second by Mr. Roll. Is there any discussion? Seeing none?
Mrs. Hume?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowman?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Sunday?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I, the meeting's over with, my counsel advised me not to talk, but since it's over with, I would like to say thank you to all the board members, whether you voted. I think my father would be very happy.
You're welcome.
So Jimbo, I'll work with you on a unveiling ceremony, so.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.